Sandra Eleanor Hensby was born on 16th September 1945 in Basingstoke, Hampshire. She was the third child of Albert and Eunice Hensby. When Sandra was 2 years old, the family emigrated to Australia. She grew up there in her earliest years before the family returned to England in 1953 when she was 8 years old. She settled back into English life and attended school, where she was described by teachers as intelligent, although she does not excel academically. She was popular, she was liked. England in the early 1950s was a country still finding its feet after the war. Rationing had only just ended. The country was rebuilding. Working families like the Hensbys lived ordinary, modest lives. The kind of lives built around community and routine and getting through each week as best you could. Sandra grew up in that world. She was not marked out for anything extraordinary. She was simply a young woman trying to find her way. As a teenager and young adult, Sandra moved through a series of jobs. She trained for 6 months as an apprentice hairdresser. She took work as a secretary in Croydon. She was young and searching, as many young women were in those years, for something that felt like her own life. Following a failed romance, she became a voluntary patient at a mental hospital near Redhill in Surrey, where she was treated for depression. She recovered. She got back up. She kept going. She became engaged to a builder named John and found work as a children's nanny for a doctor in Croydon. On 13th March 1964, Sandra gave birth to a son, whom she named Stephen. The relationship with John failed. Sandra returned to live with her parents. She considered giving Stephen up for adoption. In the end, it was her parents, Albert and Eunice, who stepped in. They adopted Stephen themselves in May 1965. Sandra left him in their care and tried to begin again. She worked at an old people's home. She moved to Portsmouth to stay with her elder sister. It was there, in Portsmouth, that she met Roger Rivett, a young man serving as an able seaman in the Royal Navy. They fell into each other's lives. They married on 10th June 1967 in Croydon. Sandra was 21 years old. Roger later left the Navy and found work as a loader for British Road Services. Sandra worked part-time at Reedham Orphanage in Purley. The marriage had its difficulties. Roger took a job on an Esso tanker in the summer of 1973 and was away from home for extended periods. When he returned, he found Sandra employed by a cigarette company in Croydon. The marriage collapsed in May 1974. Roger, suspicious of Sandra's movements while he had been away, went to live with his parents. The marriage was over. Sandra was 28 years old, separated, with no fixed arrangement for the future. She registered with a domestic agency based in Belgravia, one of the most exclusive residential districts in London, and found work caring for an elderly couple in that area. A few weeks later, through the same agency, she was offered a new position. She accepted it. She began work as a nanny at the home of a woman named Veronica Bingham, known publicly as Lady Lucan, at 46 Lower Belgrave Street. To understand what happened at 46 Lower Belgrave Street on the night of 7th November 1974, it is necessary to understand the world that Sandra Rivett walked into when she accepted that job. Richard John Bingham, Lord Lucan, the 7th Earl of Lucan, was born on 18th December 1934 into one of Britain's most prominent aristocratic families. He attended Eton. He served with the Coldstream Guards in West Germany. He worked briefly at a London merchant bank before gambling became the dominant occupation of his life. He won £26,000 in 48 hours at the tables and earned the nickname Lucky Lucan. He left banking entirely and became a professional gambler. He drove an Aston Martin. He raced powerboats. He was, for a time, even considered for the role of James Bond. He was handsome, charming, and entirely convinced of his own superiority. In 1963, he married Veronica Duncan. The couple had 3 children: Francis, George, and Camilla. Lucan inherited the earldom in January 1964 on his father's death and moved the family into the 6-story townhouse at 46 Lower Belgrave Street in Belgravia. The lifestyle was lavish. The gambling losses were enormous. He could lose £10,000 in a single night at the Claremont Club in Mayfair, the exclusive gambling establishment where Lucan and his circle of wealthy, aristocratic friends spent much of their time. The marriage deteriorated. Lucan was controlling and cruel toward his wife. He belittled her. He attempted on more than one occasion to have her sectioned. By late 1972, the marriage was over, and Lucan moved out of the family home. What followed was a bitter and prolonged legal battle for custody of the 3 children. Lucan lost. Veronica was awarded custody, with the proviso that she employ a live-in nanny to help care for the children. The family home, the 6-story townhouse in Belgravia that, if sold, could have cleared Lucan's gambling debts entirely, remained in Veronica's possession. Lucan's financial situation by 1974 was desperate. His gambling losses had continued to mount. He delayed payment of the family's bills, including the fees owed to the childcare agency. He had the family's nannies investigated by a private detective agency, looking for evidence he could use to win the children back. He was a man consumed by resentment, increasingly unstable, and by his own admission to friends, capable of extreme thoughts. He told one friend, Greville Howard, that killing his wife would solve his financial problems. He could reclaim the house, pay off his debts, and dispose of her body in the waters of the Solent, where she would never be found. His friends dismissed these statements as the ramblings of a desperate man. Lucan had learned from his daughter Frances that the family's nanny went out on Thursday evenings, her regular night off. He knew that at 9 o'clock in the evening, his wife made herself a cup of tea. He knew the layout of the house at 46 Lower Belgrave Street as well as anyone. He borrowed a Ford Corsair from a friend, a less conspicuous vehicle than his usual car. And at some point before that Thursday evening, someone removed the light bulb from the basement kitchen of the family home at 46 Lower Belgrave Street. Sandra Rivett had swapped her night off that week. Normally she went out with her boyfriend John Hankins on Thursday evenings, but she had seen him the previous day instead and was working that Thursday. She spoke to him on the telephone at around 8 o'clock in the evening of 7th November 1974. It was the last conversation she ever had. At approximately 8:55 that evening, Sandra asked Lady Lucan if she would like a cup of tea and went down the stairs to the basement kitchen to make one. She walked into a room that had no light. She was bludgeoned from behind with a length of lead pipe that had been wrapped in surgical tape. She died within minutes, choking on her own blood. Her killer then placed her body into a canvas mail sack. When Sandra did not return with the tea, Lady Lucan became concerned and descended to the basement to look for her. She called Sandra's name at the top of the stairs. She was then attacked in the darkened kitchen. Her attacker told her to shut up. As she screamed, Lady Veronica Lucan recognized the voice of her estranged husband. They struggled. She bit his fingers. When he threw her face down to the carpet, she managed to turn and fight back with enough force that he released his grip on her throat. When she asked him where Sandra was, Lucan was at first evasive. Then he admitted he had killed her. He took Veronica upstairs. He told her to put towels on the bed to avoid staining. He asked her if she had any barbiturates. He went to the bathroom to fetch a wet towel. In that moment, Lady Lucan fled the house. At around 9:45 in the evening, Veronica Bingham stumbled into the Plumber's Arms pub on Lower Belgrave Street, drenched in blood and screaming. She cried out, "Help me, help me, help me. I have just escaped from being murdered. He's in the house. He's murdered the nanny." Police were called to 46 Lower Belgrave Street. They forced their way in. In the basement, they found the canvas mail sack. Inside, it was the body of Sandra Rivett. She was 29 years old. Lord Lucan made a phone call to his mother, the Dowager Countess, that evening, speaking of a terrible catastrophe and asking her to collect the children. He then drove south, out of London to Uckfield in East Sussex, where he arrived at the home of his friend Ian Maxwell Scott at around 11:30 that night. Ian was not at home. His wife Susan received Lucan. He told her he had been walking past the family home when he spotted a man attacking his wife in the basement, had entered the house and interrupted the struggle, and that in the aftermath his wife had accused him of being responsible. Susan Maxwell Scott later said he appeared to be in a state of shock. He left her home at approximately 1:15 in the morning of 8th November 1974. That was the last confirmed sighting of Richard John Bingham, 7th Earl of Lucan. A search was launched. Lucan's Ford Corsair was found abandoned in New Haven, a port on the East Sussex coast with ferry services to France. The car's interior was stained with blood, matching both Sandra Rivett and Lady Lucan. In the boot of the car, police found another length of lead pipe, similar to the murder weapon. In Lucan's flat, his passport, his car keys, his driving license, his wallet, and 3 address books were found untouched. He had written letters to a friend, protesting his innocence and describing the events of that night in his own words. The letters and the account he gave Susan Maxwell Scott told a story of a man who had stumbled upon a scene of violence and found himself unable to explain it. The police and the evidence told a different story entirely. The inquest into the death of Sandra Rivett opened on 13th November 1974 and was adjourned multiple times before a full hearing was convened on 16th June 1975 at Westminster Coroner's Court. The coroner was Gavin Thurston. 32 witnesses were called over 4 days. Lady Lucan testified each day, appearing in a dark coat and white headscarf. The statement of her 10-year-old daughter Frances was read to the court. The forensic evidence was presented. The blood in the car, the lead pipe, the mail sack, the removed light bulb in the basement kitchen. After 4 days of evidence, the jury retired. They returned their verdict in 31 minutes. The cause of Sandra Rivett's death was murder by Lord Lucan. It was the first time a member of the House of Lords had been named a murderer since 1760. It was also the last time a coroner's court would ever name a murderer. A law was passed shortly after that prevented such verdicts being returned in future. Police issued a warrant for Lucan's arrest. He was never found. Hundreds of sightings were reported over the following years, from Africa, from Australia, from South America, from across Europe. None were substantiated. Theories multiplied. Some believed he had thrown himself from the ferry at New Haven and drowned. Some believed his wealthy friends had helped him escape abroad. One account claimed he had shot himself and his body had been fed to a tiger at a private zoo owned by one of his closest friends. Lord Lucan was declared legally dead in 1999. A death certificate was issued in 2016, allowing his son George to inherit the title as the 8th Earl of Lucan. Lady Veronica Lucan lived on in the family home at Lower Belgrave Street for decades. She gave interviews. She wrote a memoir. She said in later years that she had forgiven her husband. She was found dead at her London home in September 2017. Sandra Rivett's son Neil, born Stephen, later raised under a different name, searching for his own identity in the aftermath of a mother's murder he could not remember, has spent much of his adult life seeking justice and recognition for what was done to her. He has noted publicly that in most accounts of this case, Sandra is secondary, a footnote in the story of a missing lord. He has said, Sandra became secondary because her killer was a lord. He has spent years trying to change that. Sandra Eleanor Rivett was cremated at Croydon Crematorium on 18th December 1974. Her ashes were scattered at Mitcham Road Cemetery in Surrey. She was born in Basingstoke in 1945. She lived a life of restless movement. Australia and back, Croydon and Portsmouth, marriage and separation, a son she could not keep, jobs that came and went. She was not famous. She was not wealthy. She did not belong to the world of Belgravia and earldoms and gambling clubs and powerboats. She had registered with a domestic agency and taken a job as a nanny because she needed the work. She had swapped her Thursday night off to see her boyfriend the day before and was back on duty on a Thursday evening when someone was waiting in the dark at the bottom of the stairs. She was 29 years old. She had gone downstairs to make a cup of tea. Her killer has never stood trial. Hello everyone. Thank you for listening and drop any feedback below. I would love to hear your thoughts and hope to see you again right here on Cold Case UK.